Carol and I have known each other for about 15, 16 years now, and one of the first times we met, we were at an animal studies conference where we'd just seen a very androcentric, patriarchal paper, and a whole group of men giving a paper about animal stuff that we weren't too impressed with, and I went to the toilet, and Carol came into the toilet next to me, and I started to sing. I don't know if you know the program 2.5 Men, but I started to sing men, 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 manly men, 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 and sang through the whole song, and in the toilet next to me I heard at the end, men. So then we both came out and I said, oh, Carol, you're amazing. So we just had this connection from then, and so it's just my honour to have Carol in New Zealand for the first time from America, United States of America as well. So Carol is going to be talking, she's an author and a scholar and an artist herself, whose work focuses on the impact of new technologies on animals and their lives. She's Professor Emeritus of Design and Dynamic Media at Emily Carr University of Design in Vancouver, British Columbia, but she now lives in Eugene, Oregon. Her newest work challenges the current assumptions of creativity, offering a more comprehensive understanding through recognising animal creativity, animal cognition, consciousness, and animal agency. And she's the editor of the book Leonardo's Choice, Genetic Technologies in Animals, the author of numerous book chapters and journal essays on these kinds of issues, and she has a new book coming out. Please look out for it. She has a new book coming out called The Creative Lives of Animals, and this is what she's going to be talking about in today's keynote. Thank you.
Thank you. Kia ora. Buongiorno. I want to first, just for a few seconds, thank Annie and Phil for this opportunity. And this is a wonderful, wonderful conference, the best one I've been to in a long time. And I want to thank the two artists who came before me. Their work is really important, and it was really wonderful seeing and hearing you discuss it at length with all the images. It was just such good presentations. I'm really admirers. I'm an admirer of your work. So, I actually had a previous slide. Could we just go back to, maybe? There we go. Just so you know, the title of the book is The Creative Lives of Animals, and I just had to show the beaver. So before I say anything, I'd just like to show you this. This is the male superb bird of paradise courting a female.
She retires to consider her verdict.
And that's David Attenborough, of course.
It's hard not to feel deflated when even your best isn't good enough.
So while much of my writing has been witness to the myriad ways in which we victimize animals, I decided to write this book to better understand and communicate how animals are much more than victims. They are essential and valued beings we will lose unless we begin to understand their power. So this book tells the emerging story of how scientists are discovering animals' creativity and why this will change our assumptions about animals and creativity itself. It makes a case for valuing animal creativity as crucial to understanding the role creativity plays in our ongoing and currently troubled relationship with our home, Earth. Current research in animal behavior is uncovering capabilities similar to ours, and I don't have to list them for this audience at all, which is great. But while many popular books exist on human creativity, they continue to endorse creativity as a uniquely human trait. Unfortunately, these books incorporate little, if any, of the wealth of pertinent and valuable research on animal intelligence and creativity. So what I'm trying to argue in the book is that animals are creative beings whose contributions to the world are being wasted by our limited view of them. Whoops. Openness to new ideas is a crucial characteristic of the creative process, yet disregarding the possibility of animals being creative has blinded us from alternative and richer ideas about what creativity is and how creativity operates across species. Is our creativity only a part of a larger picture of the creative urge we have yet to discover? Yes, I think it is. Linking the concept of creativity to animals' behavior is, in its own way, a creative move, one I think perfectly suited to rethinking creativity in today's perplexing world. So the book uses and relies on detailed examples highlighting the situation in which animals rely on creative solutions to their unique circumstances, and interviews with prominent biologists and ethologists whose ongoing research in the study of animal behavior, cognition, and consciousness actually support my argument for the importance of rethinking our notions of creativity. In the book, and actually the publisher and I are arguing about this definition right now. I am defining creativity as a dynamic process in which novel and appropriate behaviors are generated by an individual with the possibility of affecting cultural, species, and evolutionary levels and may contribute to biodiversity. You will note this definition of creativity does not limit what is or isn't creative, nor does it confine itself to one species, humans, for instance. This definition not only allows for including individual animals as creative in their own cultural and species-specific ways, but incorporates the effect their accumulated creativity has on biodiversity. Defining creativity as a process, not as a static entity able to be proven or not, is emphasized for several reasons. And for some reason, everything is upside down. Like viscosity, creativity is fluid in its manifestations. If we are to learn anything about the creativity of animals, we must be able to appreciate not only the products of animal creativity, but also the sometimes complex and iterative processes by which an animal chooses to solve whatever problem they are confronted with or goal they want to achieve, even if that goal is having fun. The following are the words I, along with others, have used to describe the qualities most often appearing in any creative process: flexibility, intelligence, curiosity, inventiveness, persistence, and comfort with complexity. So keep those in mind. And then one other thing. As Lewis Hyde, the author of the book, The Gift, argues, creativity is a gift that in order to flourish must be freely given. I want to emphasize, before we go to the videos and slides, just three things. The colonization of animal creativity by humans has existed since the first human killed or domesticated the first animal. Number two, I did use some research from labs, but I was very careful not to use anything that was invasive or killed the animal. And I decided to do that because I'm publishing in science, but also because I felt that it was some way to honor the animal that had been in this situation, rather than just waste really them being there in their life. And the third thing, the book includes examples from both vertebrates and invertebrates. And the following are just a few of the examples from many, many species. I couldn't even manage to get everything into the book. I had to stop at some point. So, The first chapter is about creative intelligence, and the reason I did that was to get people, the reader, up to speed. You guys don't really need this chapter, but I'll just go over it anyway. You know, the research on animal intelligence over the last 50 years, and what that might mean for understanding animal creativity. So, let me say this first. Pigeons are considered to be one of the most intelligent birds on the planet and able to undertake tasks previously thought to be the sole preserve of humans and primates. The pigeon can also recognize all 26 letters of the English language, distinguish between actual words and gibberish, pick the piece of art considered most aesthetically pleasing, which is kind of strange, as well as being able to conceptualize. And now pigeons have become pathologists. So here is a pigeon who is choosing between malignant and benign cells, and you saw what that text said. But a recent study says that by showing the same images to different birds and combining their decisions, the accuracy rose to 99%, on par with trained human experts, and far more reliable than a computer doing automatic image analysis. So my point is not to let's have pigeons, be made to be pathologists now, but the point is that we really have missed the boat on how intelligent pigeons particularly are, but of course many animals are. The link between our inability to see many animals as creative, conscious beings and the barren confines of the environments we keep many of them in, particularly domesticated animals used for food research, indicates just how thick the filters through which we see them are. Like looking through a very dirty and rippled window, what we see is distorted, and we fill in the gaps of our understanding with our prejudices and assumptions. And pigs are really one of these animals. Animal researchers like Francois Wilmesfelder, who work closely with pigs, however, know they are extremely intelligent. They respond to verbal communication, identify objects they have not seen in some time, can distinguish slight differences in comparable objects, disregard irrelevant information, and accomplish all of these things with no instructions from the researcher, other than a direct statement such as, "Figure out what you're supposed to do." They take on tasks with motivation and persistence and are capable of what is known as one-trial learning. They are quick studies, comprehending how something works or what action is needed to achieve a goal on the first try. But even healthy and well-fed pigs exhibit depression and helplessness when they are unable to live an active and sociable life in which Wilmsfelder tells us their, quote, creative flow of engagement flourishes, unquote. And another animal that I thought was important to talk about in this chapter was ants. Whether animals are able to teach others of their kind has been a bone of contention in animal behavior. I'm not kidding. One of my reviewers said, "Animals can't teach." Teaching plays an important role in the despite all the research I had cited. Teaching plays an important role in the spread of creative behavior, and so I wanted to include this example. Thamnothorax ants use a technique known as tandem running to lead another ant from the nest to the food, with signals between the two ants controlling both the speed and course of the run. So tandem running is an example of teaching in animals. And this was found out quite a bit ago, and so it really opened the doors to the recognition of teaching in other species as well. So, in the creative communication chapter, obviously animals communicate, we know that. and they communicate within their own species in their own way. So let me just give you a...
Prairie dogs can also describe objects that they have never seen before. In one experiment, we showed prairie dogs a silhouette of a black oval, and they all consistently had the same alarm call for the black oval. In other experiments, we have shown prairie dogs silhouettes of circles and triangles, and they consistently have different alarm calls for the circles versus the triangles. Using computer analysis, we have shown that the alarm calls are made up of smaller units of sound, very much like human phonemes, such as vowels and consonants. So each alarm call of a prairie dog is equivalent to a human sentence composed of nouns and adjectives, and smaller units of sounds that make up these nouns and adjectives. The nouns are the species of predator, such as coyote or domestic dog. The adjectives are the physical descriptions of the predators, such as tall, thin, or yellow. We have also found that prairie dog alarm calls have dialects, much like human dialects. Just like a person from California might say the word dog somewhat differently from a person saying dog in Georgia, prairie dogs also have slight differences in the way that they pronounce an alarm call for, say, human in Arizona versus in New Mexico versus in Colorado.
So Konslabatchikov, his book is called Chasing Dr. Dolittle, I'm sure some of you have read it, on animal language, particularly using prairie dogs as a model species. And so instead of taking, as many people did, chimps into the lab or into captivity and trying to teach them English or language, even sign language, Kahn decided to go out and spend all his time with prairie dogs. So he and his team recorded the prairie dog's ability to discern the behavior of other species. Now, I think that's, aside from everything else, I think that's really interesting because this ability is ample evidence for the recognition of other minds along a philosophical problem, and something used often in the creative process. Even if they cannot be found at their desks, smoking their pipes and arguing with other prairie dog philosophers about whether or not they can ever know the thoughts and feelings of others, these wild conversationalists demonstrate daily their particular method of asking that question. The third chapter is all on play, and it's really interesting. Again, I've gotten a lot of flack about this chapter. Some animals can't play. I don't say that, that's what a reviewer said. Creative play is an overview of one of the most understudied and yet crucial contributor to a creative state of mind. While research from leading animal play researchers, George Burkhardt, Mark Beckov, and Sir Patrick Basin, all biologists, is highlighted along with the history of play research. There is also a long section in that chapter about my visit to Canada's Fauna Foundation Sanctuary, where chimpanzees who have come from research and zoos are living out the rest of their lives. And many of them have had quite a bit of trauma. And so it really has had an impact on their ability to play and to be creative. But I thought yeah. You gotta talk about kias when you talk about play. So here, I'm sure everybody here who's from New Zealand has seen this, you know, the kias moving around the cones to try to make the car stop so the people will give them some food. You think about that. I mean, that's like, I just love that. So I wanted to highlight New Zealand's kia as an example of animal play. Judy Diamond and Alan Bond, in their book Kia, Bird of Paradox, The Evolution of a New Zealand Parrot, describe play for the kia as, and I love this, less a set of ritualized behaviors than an attitude to the world at large. One of the things, too, is that if people think that, okay, some animals play, They don't really think that snakes could play, reptiles, amphibians, but I give a lot of examples from groups of animals, insects as well, who obviously play, well, it seems obvious to me, but that's not really an accepted thing, even in science right now. But there are, of course, researchers working on this. And this was quite lovely. This is these are 2 Cuban crocodiles, unfortunately, in a zoo, but they've lived together for quite some time. And so he likes to give, the bottom one is the male, and he likes to give his partner, I would imagine his partner, rides on his back. And some of you may be familiar with this too. I keep thinking that you all know everything I'm saying, because this stuff has been, sort of out for a while. But in bubble netting, we see an example of something that probably started as play, but then was passed along as something that was useful, and then pretty soon particular parts of the species or cultures in a particular species began to use. So let me just start that, because it's really beautiful. This is a beautiful video of this from the top. So this technique involves several humpbacks. One of the humpbacks spirals upward, entrapping the fish, usually herring, and above in a tower of bubbles, while several other whales call loudly from the bottom of the cylinder, forcing the trapped fish upwards. These whales then move upward, opening their mouth in order to catch as many fish as possible in their fluke jaws. Now, Patrick Bateson and Martin, who wrote a book on play, suggest that given the uniqueness of this feeding technique to the humpbacks of the waters of southeastern Alaska, at one point it was probably a creative discovery. Play and creativity are meshed in emotional, cognitive, and neurophysiological ways, depending on the environment in which individuals, both animals and human animals, find themselves. It is, like creativity, fluid. The 4th chapter is on animal building and tool use, and I didn't really include anything on tool use because that seems to always really, be available. But building, I thought, is, an incredibly complex process. So in this chapter, we look at the architectural talents of animals as diverse as beavers, caddisflies, bees, and bowerbirds. So caddisflies, and again, I keep saying this, some of you probably know this. Caddisflies develop through 4 stages: egg, larva, pupa, and adult. When in the underwater stage, the larva itself constructs an ornate protective case around itself using sticky silk threads expelled from its head, carefully choosing just the right material, such as plant fragments, sand grains, wood fragments, pebbles, or small shells. They construct the exquisitely intricate cases in which they live for up to 2 years until shedding them as adults. This one is, for some reason, one of my favorites. And I'll just go into this because to watch the beaver is to fall in love with the beaver.
Stones help weigh down the base. The whole family works together, carefully interlocking the timber. They dredge mud from the pond bottom to seal the dam. Each pond traps several inches of sediment every year, so there's plenty of it. The young act as apprentice builders, learning the tricks of the trade. The final results are impressive. In the Rocky Mountains, Beaver dams slowly filter billions of tons of water. The ponds build up soil and nutrients and help prevent floods and droughts.
Given the many challenges beavers face in building their homes, beavers regularly employ abstract concepts and reasoning in their daily life, with innovation and insight emerging as they encounter especially difficult challenges. One of the most important moments in the creative process for anyone is the realization an accident can be used to propel the creative process further. Consequently, if a mistake dissuades one from following a misleading path, it also may reveal new options of approach. The ability to recognize possibilities for something new out of what others might consider to be an obstacle, a piece of trash, or an aberration is a cornerstone of the creative process, and beavers and other animals are masters at this process. And of course, probably most everybody's familiar with the bowerbird. This is the Vogelthorpe bowerbird. And creative decisions for these birds are based on what the female will think. So here he flies away and he goes off to get another red flower, which he carefully places and then backs up, checks it out. And then he flies up to look at it from this branch where the female will sit. Oh, and if you want to get addicted to anything, like you don't have other addictions, go to the Cornell ornithology lab and look at the bird of paradise stuff and the bowerbird stuff, and you won't be able to go out of your house for like days. And this, again, sometimes when I came across the research, the fact that these scientists were spending all their lives with a particular animal is just really quite impressive. This is, and I'll let him just talk first, Tom Seeley, who wrote Honeybee Democracy.
One of the things that I find most fascinating is a phenomenon called swarm intelligence or collective intelligence. This is a process whereby groups of animals organize themselves to make good decisions. And we've long known that groups of animals can work better than individuals in doing such things as capturing prey and defending themselves. It's only relatively recently that we've understood that another advantage that groups have over individuals is in their ability to make decisions. And what I've got here is a swarm of bees. This is a swarm of bees that I've mounted on a board. By putting them on this board, it just spreads them out so that I can watch their behavior more easily. In nature, they would have clustered on a tree branch. And what they're doing is they've left their parental hive. The parental colony became very strong. The old queen, the mother queen, left with about 2/3 of the workers and forms this assembly or bivouac. And they do this because when they leave the parental hive, they actually haven't chosen their new home. So they make this temporary stop here, get their bearing, get assembled, figure out who's going to go in the swarm, who's going to go back to the parental hive. And from here, the scout bees go out searching for home sites and conduct their search for a new home, which usually takes at least a few hours and sometimes a few days. This is a group that shows swarm intelligence par excellence, because they're a group of bees that are homeless and they have a very important decision to make. They have to decide where their new home is going to be. And they bring to this task the fact that they've got the swarm as a whole has about 10,000 worker bees and one queen bee in it. Of those 10,000 or so bees, only a few hundred are actually involved in the decision making. But still, when you think about it, That's several hundred bees that can go searching far and wide for potential home sites, which would be cavities in trees. And it's several hundred individuals, not just one, that can then debate the possibilities, kick the ideas around, and decide among themselves through debate which one is actually the best. And I think you can see that's a very powerful way to make a decision. If you've got a group of individuals that are cooperative, willing to work together to find the options, talk about the options, identify the best one, and then agree to go forward with the one that's the best choice. So that's what we call swarm intelligence, and I like to investigate it with a real swarm, a swarm of bees. This bee is indicating the direction to her site by the direction of the waggling. This, for example, if you imagine a clock face, she's orienting, as she walks forward while waggling, she's orienting or pointing at about 5 o'clock. And that means that, and the reference that she uses to orient, to choose that 5 o'clock direction is straight up on the swarm. And that means that a bee that's following her dance knows that when she leaves the swarm to find the site she's indicating, she should orient at 5 o'clock relative to the sun. In other words, the bee would leave the swarm, figure out the direction of the sun, and then fly off in a direction that would be 5 o'clock from that direction of the sun. If this site, so for example, if she were pointing her dance straight down at 6 o'clock, that would mean the direction to the site is directly away from the sun. If she were doing these waggles, walking straight up on the swarm, that would mean the site that she's advertising is right in the direction of the sun. And then the distance is indicated in the dance by how long each one of these waggle runs lasts. Let's roughly time this one. 1001, 1002, 1003, about 3 seconds. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, somewhere between 3 and 4 seconds. And the conversion is about 1 second of waggling represents approximately 1,000 meters of distance to the potential home site. So this home site is between 3,000 and 4,000 meters away, and in miles, that would be between 1.8 and 2.4 miles away. So quite a good distance. And one of the things I find most remarkable about the bees is that the site that she's indicating is a hollow tree, a tree with a cavity in it, and it might be one tree. It might be in a forest, so it's one tree in the middle of a woods, and it's at a certain direction from here. It's several miles away, and these other bees that are following her dance are actually able to take those instructions with sufficient accuracy, sufficient precision, and go out and find the site that she's advertising. Isn't that amazing? I find it so. I don't think I could do that. I could read her dance, I could measure her angle quite precisely, and I could get the distance information precisely, but could I then use it and find the tree? Only with great difficulty. One of the features of the decision making by the bees is that the process is built upon disagreement. It starts with, of these several hundred scout bees, each one will fly out, search around. They will typically, among them, they'll find a dozen or more potential home sites, and those bees that find potential home sites will come back and advertise them with dances. So you can have on the swarm at any one time a dozen or more different sites being advertised by the dances. And so they then have the problem of how to sort it out, how to winnow out all but the best one. And they have a process that's a lot like a political election. You think about it, you've got, in a human political election, a democratic election, you've got multiple candidates, you've got supporters for the different candidates. The supporters for the different candidates produce advertisements to try to recruit the uncommitted voters to favor their candidate. The scout bees do essentially the same sort of thing. got bees that are affiliated with different sites. They perform advertisements to draw uncommitted scouts to their site. And one thing that's critical about the way it works in the bees is that their advertisements are all completely honest. And what I mean by that is that if the site is, they adjust how long they will dance, whether it's 1 minute or 10 minutes or 20 minutes, a scout bee will adjust how long she advertises her site according to the goodness of the site. The better the site, the longer the dance. And what that means is that an excellent site will be advertised more persistently. It will, the buildup of interest in that site will proceed most rapidly. And in the bees political contest, they run the contest until one of the sites, until one of these candidate sites has gained enough or a critical level of interest, a critical level of visits by scout bees. And once that site has achieved that, the bees visiting that site recognize that, oh yeah, our site has reached the quorum, the critical level, our site has won, and then they come back and they announce to all of the other bees that the debate is over. They can proceed now to implementing their decision. So that's how it works with the bees. And except for that last little part at the end, by using a quorum rather than a majority rule, the way they make their decision and deal with disagreement is very much like our own political elections. Isn't that amazing?
We should fly him into the White House. While first individual scouts find what they consider, and this is important, the individual scouts, right? So it is a democracy. Each individual scout decides what would be the best new home. And then honeybees really meet though they come back and, as he says, debate, and I love the fact that he uses the word debate, honeybees meet their creative architectural demands collectively in what Seeley calls a quorum, accepting what is a good enough home, while other species may go it alone. And now, for everybody's favorite chapter, creative sexuality. In an animal world, sexual possibilities seem endless. Bruce Begamy, or Begamil, I've heard two different pronunciations, who wrote the definitive book on this, uses the phrase biological exuberance. Pixar certainly gets it wrong when they miss the chance to tell what really would have transpired after little clownfish Nemo's mother was eaten by a barracuda. Since clownfish are sequential intersexuals, his mother would turn into a female since he must now raise the eggs alone. Nemo was born a male, and when grown a bit, would mate with his father, now a female. So this was not in the movie. Begamil, in a chapter of his book, and the chapter was called Explaining Away Homosexuality, and this is a quote, one of my favorites in all the research I did. Astounding as it sounds, a number of scientists have actually argued that when a female bonobo wraps her legs around another female, rubbing her own clitoris against her partner's while emitting screams of enjoyment, this is actually greeting behavior, or appeasement behavior, or reassurance behavior, or reconciliation behavior, or tension regulation behavior, or social bonding behavior, or food exchange. Almost anything, it seems, besides pleasurable sexual behavior. So 300 species, and those are the ones that are just documented, of vertebrates are known to practice homosexuality, and giraffes are one of them, and I loved this photo of the two male giraffes with their necks entwined. So sexuality adds another level of investigation to our journey, one that looks not only at sexual selection as an indicator of individual choice, and that I think is really important, but also as a contributor to biodiversity. Research and theories on how sexual selection has co-evolved into attraction are talked about. And I interviewed Richard O. Prum, who is quite the thing now, with his book, The Evolution of Beauty. If we want to understand, like play, sexuality is often found to be a driver of creative behavior. If we want to understand how creative animals are, we need to admit that individual animals are able to choose what gives them sexual pleasure, and sometimes emotional connection as well. So including some sexual behavior as creative is an important step in understanding the creativity of animals, but also how important those individual choices are for the evolution of biodiversity. And I'll come back to that. So another bird of paradise, this is the western paratea, and this is on that website I told you about, and this is very interesting.
And here's the view from the female perspective. Here are the two remote cameras together. While Ed knew the female perspective of the male's display would be different, he never dreamed there was a totally new discovery waiting to be uncovered. By observing the male's courtship dance from above, a relatively minor patch of iridescent feathers on the back of the head comes into view. To the female, this appears to be a visual cue tracing the side-to-side head movements, which would otherwise be invisible against the velvet black backdrop created by the male's skirt. Until Ed and Tim saw their video, they hadn't understood the significance of this little ornament. In a single moment, they had captured a unique insight into the forces of sexual selection that drive the evolution of the birds of paradise.
So what's so interesting about these two guys is that one a photographer, a National Geographic photographer, and the other one the biologist, is that they have videotaped all the birds of paradise, and their dances, their singing, how they move their feathers, all that. It's just so interesting. But now they're going back and they're re-videotaping everything from the female's point of view. So, and that's one of the tapes they have. I don't think they have all the tapes up, so, I'm sure you'll want to see those when they come out. Thinking of creativity as a wide angle through which to view ways of approaching various intentions is what the creative process is all about. And 2 chapters at the end, the last 2, emotion and culture. And I'm not going to spend too long on emotion because there's lots of understanding of that, I think, in this room. But it's an overview of recent findings on animal emotions in a wide variety of species and how and why emotion, of course, is an important driver of creativity in animals as it is in humans. And I actually had a reviewer say, "What does emotion have to do with creativity?" Specifically, empathy, then I had to answer, empathy as a conduit to creativity in animals is explored, and the new area of animal personality. Now, I decided, and I actually have a big section on chickens, thanks to Annie. Empathy allows us to understand others not by thinking about how they might feel, but by feeling that way ourselves. Sometimes the problem being creatively solved is an emotional one. Certain animals seem to have not only the more common ability to be aware of another's emotion, empathy, but to be able to tolerate ambiguity, be open to new experience, such as difficult or conflicting emotions, and the cognitive sensitivity to that perceived emotional problem. The result is often a creative emotional response. And chickens are a wonderful example of this, as I learned from Annie Potts' book Chicken, Karen Davis' writing, and that of Lori Marino. Empathy is not always used for good. The ability to understand the desires or needs of another certainly plays a role in tactical deception, but the same system of empathic knowledge that allows for deception also allows for empathic clues on how to creatively resolve conflicts and build relationships that sustain cohesive social groups. These goals are equally important drivers of behavioral diversity. The other part of the chapter talks about this new area, relatively new area of research on animal personality, like they finally got around to that, right? An emerging area of research is helpful, and it's very helpful in understanding what may be creative behavior in animals. Kay Hollenkamp, and she's really pretty incredible because she has like now almost all her doctoral students are females, and she has them like scattered all over the world, you know, doing all kinds of things. And then they graduate, and then they're starting similar programs. And a lot of what they are studying is the hyena. And this particular project was in Masai Mara. And all the hyenas there were given the opportunity to try to open a closed container. It was found, not surprisingly to me, that the hyenas who actually opened the box were the hyenas who were not afraid to investigate the new item and then tried many different solutions to opening the box, not just the same thing all over again. Neophilia, having an interest in the new, and its opposite, neophobia, are important emotions that contribute or constrain creativity and innovation. And let's see, how much time do I have? Just a little, sorry. So this is Hal Whitehead.
Well, we know only a tiny bit of the behavior or the culture of sperm whales. And more generally, we only know a tiny bit of the behavior or culture of whales and dolphins. But we do know that their cultures include diet, foraging methods, dialects, songs, social conventions, movements, and play behavior. They include stable traditions, like the coda repertoires, perhaps a bit analogous to our languages, which are stable over generations. They also include short-term fads, like killer whales pushing around dead salmon for a week or 2 weeks, and then everyone getting bored and say, that's not cool anymore, and stopping, rather like our fads for boy bands. Their cultures affect their ecology, their evolution, and what the animals really are. Their cultures are not like our cultures, but they're vital for them.
Biologists Hal Whitehead and Luke Rendell's research on whale and dolphin culture, and there is a book published by University of Chicago on just that, has really helped to open up research on the culture of other animals. Just to say at the very end, creativity is a powerful force throughout the biosphere at both micro and macro levels. Individual animals act creatively in areas such as communication, building, play, tool use, sex, parenting, foraging, or hunting, and sometimes pass these actions on to others in their group. These solutions may be novel and useful to others of their species, and over time may affect their evolution. What we probably have not noticed is that we are swimming in an ocean of creativity. It's happening all the time around us. Might acknowledging this contribute to changing the way we view our place in the world? Discounting the many levels at which the creative process works is a major stumbling block to understanding its power. We need a redefined sense of a universal multi-species creativity. Individuals and cultures of all the beings on this planet are essential contributors to this creativity. Ignoring this is a sure road to the loss of our own imagination and the breaking of the bond with how imagination and creativity flow. Thanks.